Hello, I'm Stacy with the IIA. I'm here with Dan to talk about how internal audit can become the most sought after in their organization. Dan, how can internal auditors ensure that their knowledge and expertise are in line with their stakeholders?
I think far too often the internal auditors have the perception of kind of coming around and being the knowers as opposed to really understanding and learning the business. And so what I'd like to see is really have internal auditors think about new ways to work that are much more agile and condense learning into a shorter period so that they're focused on short-term deliverables where they can learn and grow with the business as opposed to generating long audit planning cycles and showing up as the knowers or the police.
What can internal auditors do to progress from being a knower to actually more value add for their stakeholders?
The first step is to really quantify problems and quantify what you're working on, because I think that forces you to think through the expectations in sort of a scientific and analytical way, as opposed to the checklist, kind of the checklist-based approach. And I think the second aspect is that aspect of working in a more agile way of thinking about what's the highest area of risk right now, explore that, learn, and then move on to the next one, as opposed to having this sort of pre-baked traditional sort of audit plan or risk control matrix that we're so used to working from.
So help us understand how internal auditors can better leverage the data.
Great question. So, and I actually think there's two sides to this. I think one is kind of goes back to that bit about just quantifying better. So even if you're not so technically inclined to use advanced software and data analytics tools and things like that, I think by taking some simple steps in mapping out risk and control oriented processes and putting numbers around, for example, how important or how much of that particular risk does this control mitigate? By quantifying and putting numbers there, we can ultimately build sort of key risk indicators that say, overall in this process of IT physical security, how much total risk assurance do we have in this process? So we're sort of taking the traditional process-based approach to auditing, but adding numbers that at the end give us a way to quantify and objectively make evaluations based on data at the end. And then second to that is a level below that when making assessments of whether a control is effective, how severe is a risk, being able to use analytic tools, mine real data and find objective truth as opposed to sort of perceived truth or biased truth through sample testing, I think is a really, really important skill. And I think if you look at all the job boards for internal auditors now, they're all looking for folks with data analytics skills for exactly that reason.